Hello everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. Today I want to talk about Luna and its current price action and what some of our indicators are making of it, as well as talk a little bit about why I think Luna might be especially well positioned to do well in a bear market. If you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us on Twitter, where we put out regular updates about our risk indicators and more. So to start off, I want to talk a little bit about the recent price action that Luna's been showing. I think if you've been following Luna's price action, it's been quite impressive what it's able to do. It actually started rallying several days before Bitcoin kind of caught a bounce in the last couple of days. So I want to talk a little bit about what our indicators are making of this action and maybe where we might expect things to go moving forward. So what I'm going to start with is our upside downside potential indicator, or UDPI, for Luna. So what I'm showing you here is the price action of Luna color coded to our risk indicator. So 5 is high risk, -5 is low risk. And you can see is it does a good job of identifying these high and low risk points throughout Luna's history. And I'm showing you the long-term version of it. So this is the version of the model that cares about moves that play out over kind of months to years. So these are longer, kind of broader risk cycles. It doesn't care as much about this kind of intermediate volatility. We actually have shorter-term time frames that I'll talk about in a minute that do care more about this kind of interim volatility. That's not what this particular version of the UDPI cares about. So if we go over and look where we are right now, you know, Luna had rallied really impressively coming out of the summer until it kind of got to these red zones. Then it kind of had to just more or less move sideways, a little bit up, cool off a bit, kind of in this general overall range, before it was able to move back up again, put in another all-time high, and then now it's corrected off of that, off of these kind of reasonably high risk but not super high risk levels here. Well, you'll notice that we're starting to dip just ever so much into the green zone, and we did that right before this rally began that we've been seeing more recently, this nice move up that Luna has been putting in. So if we flip over to just the raw output of the UDPI, we can see things a little bit more clearly of what's going on under the hood. So you can see, you know, this big move up in the early 2021, going up all the way to the highest levels of risk, then dumping all the way back down to almost the bottom of the risk range in the summer, for rallying again really impressively, and then overall kind of a general cooling off of risk, although we did then realize some more upside potential to put in that all-time high before now correcting down into these lower risk zones. So you'll notice we're actually below 0 on the long-term UDPI, which means that it thinks that in the coming months there's more upside potential for Luna than downside. And we've maybe started to begin realizing some of that upside potential just recently in this recent pump that we've been having. But I think it's also informative to look at the shorter term time frames to see what they think. So the medium term UDPI cares about moves that play out over weeks to months, so shorter. And then the short term is days to weeks, so the shortest kind of time frame that we monitor here. And what you can notice is that in the shorter term, Luna has been chewing up a good amount of its shorter term upside potential, right? So it's been chewing through some of that. And what I'm personally going to be watching for is, for a lot of assets, at least recently, they've been catching resistance at around these levels, so kind of 1 to 2 level. And this kind of generally happens in bearish conditions, that if you do manage to get up into these higher risk level zones, a lot of resistance just steps in because people want to take profits, or people who are getting back to their cost bases if they had bought at higher levels are exiting the market because they're fearful. You know, they're not confident in rallies being able to continue, so they just want to get out while they're even. And so I would be a little surprised if Luna can just immediately go blast off and realize all of this upside potential like it has sometimes in the past. I actually personally expect it to probably catch a top somewhere in this ballpark in the coming kind of days to weeks if this rally continues. Now, that's not guaranteed. That's just kind of my reading, my speculation. So you should make your own decisions of what you think is likely. But that's just my interpretation. Is I would expect this current rally to probably catch some resistance as it gets up into these levels. Maybe have to consolidate sideways for a while, or maybe even have a bit of a correction before moving back up. But, you know, with Luna, as long as we see, if we could see a higher low, even if a correction does have to happen, see a higher low, then go on to put in a higher high, I think that's just a good structure. You know, that's kind of what happened going into this all-time high up here. We, you know, went up, corrected down, went up again, but we set in a higher low, then a higher high. So you might see a similar thing play out where maybe we have to come down. You would, excuse me, like to see a higher low, and then maybe then that'll set us up to put in a higher high later. And the other advantage of kind of that more slow and methodical move is that you know, as you chew up some of this upside potential, excuse me, this upside potential, having that correction allows you to cool off a bit, allows you to kind of accrue more upside potential that then you can go in and rally in and grab later. So sometimes a more slow and steady move up is actually more sustainable than just in a parabolic move that goes really fast, kind of makes everyone just go ahead and grab profit because they don't believe it'll be able to continue. Then that can just crash the price off of that. Kind of building up support as you go can be advantageous. So that's just my reading of it, is that I'm going to be watching this. You know, I don't think we're quite at the level yet that I'm convinced that we have to hit a top, but once we start getting to these levels, I'll be more and more expecting at least a local top to start forming. But that's just my interpretation. So another indicator that I wanted to show was our trend confidence indicator for Luna. So this is an indicator that we have on the channel that's designed to measure basically how confident we can be in a given uptrend or a downtrend. And the way that you can generally read this is that if price is in an uptrend and the TCI is in the green, that means that you can be relatively confident of that uptrend and that it seems more likely than not the uptrend will continue. If you're in an uptrend and then the TCI flips red, like here, for example, that might suggest that the uptrend is over and that some downside is likely to follow. Yeah. So that's essentially how you can read this. So green, anything above 0 is kind of bullish. Red, anything below 0 is kind of bearish. And so what's really concerning is when you're in kind of an uptrend and this flips red, because that means that that uptrend is weakening and that more upside might be difficult. So even here, you know, we did flip red kind of here, and then we did kind of grind up in price slowly, but it was not a very convincing uptrend. But then once the TCI flipped green, that's really when we exploded back up to put in these all-time highs. So that's just kind of the general way this indicator works, is that it's just saying how confident it is in a given uptrend. So in the green with an uptrend, that's probably going to be a relatively convincing uptrend. Red in an uptrend, that'll be less convincing. Or if you see, you know, kind of in a downtrend and then it flips green, that means that you might see some uptrend falling. So this is a nice leading indicator here in the summer before we put in this huge rally to the upside. You see that this flipped green well before that pump really kicked off. So let's look at where we are right now. So where we are is we actually have just closed green for a couple of days here. So coming off of kind of this bottom here, you'll see this popped up into the green as we're going up. So this suggests that the TCI thinks that there's some reason to believe that this uptrend could continue, right? That, you know, it's more, this looks more like an uptrend than a downtrend right now. And so there's some hope this could continue. Now, obviously, the caveat with all of this is that everything is to some degree dependent on what the broader macro conditions are doing. You know, if Bitcoin is doing well, the rest of the market tends to do well. If Bitcoin does poorly, the rest of the market tends to do poorly. So it's not guaranteed by, you know, I would not be convinced, or I would be hesitant to say that Luna will be able to continue rallying if Bitcoin were to dump off of these levels, or, you know, especially if Bitcoin lost the 30K range. I would not expect Luna to just be able to totally shrug things off, go parabolic off of those levels. I think that Luna will be grounded to the broader market to some degree. But I also think that there are reasons to believe that Luna could do quite well in a bear market, or at least better than a lot of other altcoins in a bear market. And I think one of the fundamental reasons for this is the existence of UST, the stablecoin that's native to the Terra Luna protocol. And the reason I say this is that in bearish conditions, you know, one of the things that there is a lot of demand for in crypto is stablecoins, right? If people are getting worried about the market, if they don't want to be holding volatile assets anymore because they think they're going to go down, they want to take profits. Now, some people just take profits directly into fiat. Some people will take it into centralized stablecoins, you know, like Tether or USDC. But I think there's an increasing demand for decentralized stablecoins as well, and UST is probably one of the most prominent decentralized stablecoins out there. And I think there are other reasons why UST stands out in bearish conditions, because there's a lot of useful things you can do with UST that you can't necessarily do with other stablecoins. And one of the things that you can do is the Anchor protocol. So I'm not going to go into all the details of how the Anchor protocol works, but essentially Anchor protocol is a protocol that's on Terra that has had for a long time, and, you know, hopefully into the future, a pretty stable 20% yield per year. So 20%, you know, annual yield off of just staking UST. So, you know, you put in UST, and then you're just earning pretty nice passive income on it, and it's a stable coin. So as long as, you know, the Terra protocol stays robust and that UST doesn't lose its peg to the dollar, you're shielded from that downside risk in a bear market that volatile assets have. And then you're just gaining this kind of passive income. So I think it's something that's very appealing to a lot of people in these bearish markets, that if people are feeling fearful about the market, they don't want to be holding these volatile assets, then why not just switch over to a stable coin to earn some passive yield on it. So I think that's one of the kind of advantages of UST, is that there's these useful protocols on Terra for UST to be used, and UST being has so far proved to be a pretty robust stable coin. And so that is one source of demand for Luna, because, you know, the relationship between Luna and Terra is that Luna is one of the main backers of UST, right? So to mint UST, you burn Luna. You know, to create UST, you burn Luna, and then you can also then burn UST to create more Luna. So you can kind of go either direction. But if you want to create new UST, you'd have to buy Luna. So that creates a demand vector for Luna. And that might be why we've seen Luna do quite well in these bearish conditions, right? You know, Luna put in an all-time high back in December when Bitcoin was quite bearish. Bitcoin was not looking great in December, you know, below a lot of its key moving averages. And, you know, Luna has held up, you know, kind of remarkably well, even though Bitcoin has not been doing well in the kind of the interim. And I think my own personal opinion is that things like this help. Now, the specific headline I'm showing you here is about how the Terra Foundation, I believe it was, injected a bunch of money into the Anchor reserve to make sure that it doesn't get depleted. So this was a whole thing where there was concerns that Anchor wasn't going to be able to maintain its 20% yield rate because there weren't enough people coming in to act as borrowers. So, you know, in the Anchor protocol, there needs to be this kind of balance between lenders and borrowers, and there weren't enough borrowers coming in to be able to sustain that yield rate for the people who were lending. But this has been backstopped to allow Anchor to maintain its yield for longer. So from that perspective, you know, this just gives me, you know, hope that the dynamics that may have been helping Terra to do well, or Luna to do well so far, are not gone, right? I think if Anchor protocol were to have to substantially reduce its yield, it'd become a lot less desirable, or a lot less kind of enticing compared to other yields you can get in stablecoins elsewhere that are lower. But it would be less kind of a reason to go to Terra if you could just go somewhere else and get a similar yield. So for the kind of the medium term, you know, as long as this kind of backstopping maintains, or until maybe the Anchor protocol can get a better balance between lenders and borrowers again, I think this dynamic could continue, where increased demand for UST could just keep buoying the price of Luna, and it might be able to hold up kind of especially well, whereas other altcoins especially might not do so well if Bitcoin remains in a more bearish state. So just to wrap up, I just did want to show the current UDPI levels for Luna as we wrap up here. So the long-term UDPI is at negative 1.06, medium-term negative 1.0, and short-term is a little bit above 0. So long and short-term are telling a similar story. So in the coming kind of months and coming weeks to months, more upside and downside potential that seems realistic. And in the short-term, a little bit more undecided, potentially getting more toward an overheated zone. Again, I personally am going to be looking at kind of the 2 level as being a pretty critical one. That if Luna's getting to 2, you know, I think the likelihood of it finding a top there is quite high in current market conditions. Not guaranteed, but that's just the way I see it. When you're in bearish conditions, I just kind of shift my frame of reference on the UDPI. I see getting up to these levels quite unlikely in bearish conditions. So if you do manage to get up to just to kind of these levels, that's where I'd start to get quite cautious with it. But that's just my interpretation, not financial advice. You should make your own decisions. All right, if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us on Twitter. And remember, with the UDPI, we're all going to make it.